All right, ladies and gentlemen, as we start the Cold War here, I think you need to understand uh, the term of Russian aggression, and that's the way they refer to it in your standards on W60 is explain Russian aggression after World War II. And hopefully these videos are helping you, especially the ones where I give you a visual here to look at. This is a map of basically what it looked like after World War II was over with. And to explain how the Cold War starts here, you got to understand what was going on in Europe immediately after World War II. Okay, so go back to 1939. World War II isn't really ramped up just yet. It isn't September 1st yet, and Poland has not been invaded, but there has been a deal between Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler called the Ribbentrop-Molotov deal. Please take notes on this and just bullet it every now and then. Uh, if you bullet anything, 1939, Molotov, uh, Ribbentrop deal there, that was between Russia and Nazi Germany. And even then, Stalin said, if you're looking at the screen here, Stalin said these countries right here will divide up evenly because I want a buffer zone to keep Russia safe. And rightfully so. Next bullet. Russia had been invaded several times. Go all the way back to Napoleon and World War One, and finally, in 1941, Hitler turns and stabs Stalin in the back and tries to invade the USSR in Operation Barbarossa, which doesn't work out for him. So, as the Russians are pursuing, and the Red Army is pursuing the Nazis across Eastern Europe, they are taking each one of these little countries as they go, and they're installing communist governments. Even if these little countries did not install communist governments, um, Stalin would invite the leaders to Moscow and he'd have them murdered, or he would send secret police into these little countries and have the regime removed, and he would put one in that was favorable or agreeable to him. Okay, so this is looked at by the other two, the big two, Russia and, the United States and Great Britain are looking at Russia going, man, what's going on? Because this isn't right, but at the same time, they didn't want to make Russia so mad that they would stop fighting, because really Russia could have stopped fighting at any time, just like they did in World War One and withdraw in there. The Nazis would have been with a lot of power. So they just kind of turned a blind eye to it. But after the war's over, it can't be ignored anymore. And relationships really go south after the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Harry S. Truman did not like Stalin. Winston Churchill did not like Stalin or the way that he ruled over Russia. So when does this all go way south between the United States, Great Britain, and Russia? Well, Winston Churchill is doing a tour. Next bullet here. Winston Churchill at Westminster College, Fulton, Missouri. In 1947, he makes a speech and he says, an iron curtain has descended across the continent of Europe, and Russian aggression and Joseph Stalin must be stopped. Well, Joseph Stalin's a nice guy. How do you think he responded? He said it was a declaration of war. He forms all of these little countries right here up into a union called a Comintern, which turns into the Warsaw Pact. And it's basically now you have Eastern Europe and Russia, or the USSR satellites, the communist union versus the West, the capitalist and the nationalist union. And you get these two superpowers emerge, the USSR and the United States. Okay, so, and this is going to lead to a whole bunch of problems. The reason they call it a Cold War is because the United States and the USSR refused to communicate with one another. And when Harry S. Truman has an atomic bomb dropped on Japan, that was basically it. The USSR was terrified that the United States may use atomic weapons again, so it starts an arms race of nuclear weapons, of who could make the biggest, the baddest, the most. And now we have enough nuclear warheads to destroy the Earth 30 times over. Isn't that great? And we spend a lot of tax dollars to keep those nuclear weapons up. So with the souring of relationships and pride and all of this stuff, it has really ravaged Eastern Europe, and it still continues. Of all the weapons that the USSR was sending to different countries to keep capitalism out, now those weapons are still there, and guess who's using them now? You might have heard of ISIS or any of these other groups that, if you look, well, if this map went any further east, Russia also had dealings in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, all those countries where we're having a little bit of trouble at now. So it leads to the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and basically the Cold War itself and the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s, where we almost went to war with Russia again. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So Russian aggression ramps up after World War II because they want to use these countries as a buffer or a shield against the West. And basically, Stalin is wanting to increase his power over other nations. So I hope that helps explain that a little bit since you've got the map here, and we'll go in a little bit more detail on that in the next unit.